Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today I wanted to go through, I got 5 of these, but win total best bets within the SEC, right? Projecting which teams are going to go over, and in one of these cases, under their win total for 2026. Now, before we get into it, the season is right around the corner, right? We're just 19 days away from college football being back on our TVs. Subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I am doing college football stuff every single day. I'll be doing it every single day for the rest of the offseason, and then it's only going to ramp up when the season begins. So I appreciate everybody who already is supporting me, and if you haven't yet, please do it. It helps me out so much to keep pumping out this content for you guys. So let's go straight into it here, right? I've got 5 teams here. I've got 1 under and 4 overs for the win totals. We're going to start with the under. And the first one is a team that a lot of people are really excited about. They don't stop talking about it. I have LSU going under 8.5 wins this fall in year 1 under Lane Kiffin. Now, that can be a little bit polarizing, but the win total being down at 8.5, that's there for a reason, right? Even though, the national perception of LSU is like this is the most talented roster in the country. You have Lane Kiffin, who's a top 5 or 10 coach in the country based on how you want to look at it. You have media members saying it's national championship appearance or bust, playoff or bust. But that win total being down at 8.5, it's reflective of a few things, right? And one of the most important ones is that schedule. They play a very hard schedule. Most teams in the SEC do. There's really not an easy SEC schedule, but looking at LSU's, that opening game against Clemson is not a gimme. It's not. I think they'll win it, but it is not a gimme. It's not a penciled-in win. Some road games in the SEC, right? Ole Miss. You have to go to Auburn, which is a tricky spot. You have to go to Neyland up at Tennessee, at Arkansas to end the year. So the road games are more plucky upset spots as opposed to big-time challenges, but they also play Texas A&M. They also play Alabama. They play Texas. LSU does play most of those big dogs in the SEC. You missed Georgia, but you got a lot of really high-caliber opponents on this schedule if you're LSU. And there's no denying the overall talent of this Tigers roster, and I'm not here trying to do that, right? Their defense, I think, could be even better than what their offense profiles as with Blake Baker calling the shots there. Just the overall firepower that LSU has on their defense. My biggest concern offensively is Sam Leavitt, frankly. And it's his health. Right, we've seen him struggle with injuries in the past. He missed all of spring, so he is back and he's going here in fall camp, which is a really good sign. But missing all of spring, period, is worrisome to me, especially when you're transferring up to a new conference and a new coaching staff in a new school that also has so much new around you, right? Like all the other players just about on this LSU offense are new to the system. They do, like double-digit transfer receivers. So all of that new and not having spring to help get used to it does worry me a bit. And here's the more, maybe taboo reason why I'm a little bit lower on LSU's win total. If they pick up maybe their 3rd loss, right, or just we get to a point where LSU is not really in the playoff race anymore, I don't know what's stopping a bunch of these players from saying, I'm going to the NFL, this was fun, play these last 2 games without me. Because Sam Leavitt last year, for all he did for Arizona State, he did quit on that team when he was beat up. He quit on them. So now you have him in the situation here in the fold here. All these other big-time players for LSU, they're not on the roster this year because they love LSU. They're on the roster because it's where Lane Kiffin and all this money was. Right? They're playing for a championship this season. They're not playing for LSU as a school and as a brand. Right, so if LSU's out of the playoff picture, that last game at Arkansas, I don't know if I can trust all those guys to go play. So let's say LSU is 8-3, they're out of the playoff picture, they can go to Arkansas with their JV squad and lose that game to go 8-4. And that just worries me a little bit to where I think you can maybe have a loss that shouldn't be on that schedule late in the year because I don't want to question the character of the kids because I can't really blame them if they do opt out to go to the pros late in the year. But that is something that worries me. And there is also a chaos scenario for LSU early on in the year where let's just say because of how much portal new there is, it just doesn't click easily. 1-3 is not impossible. It's very unlikely, but it's not impossible. That game against Clemson, just little old Clemson under Dabo Swinney, do they even play football anymore? They can catch you if your offense isn't clicking. At Ole Miss, we know how hard that game can be. Against A&M, what did A&M do in Baton Rouge last year? I know it's a brand new team. I know it's a brand new team for LSU. I'm not using that as a reason why I have them beating LSU. I actually have LSU over A&M, but it's a very quality team where you play 3 really tough opponents early on in the year. If things aren't clicking, all those games are losable. So there's just a bunch of questions for me about LSU. Not really concerns, but just questions that give me pause, whether it's their schedule or their roster. And that's why I'm going under 8.5 for LSU win total this season. Moving on now to the Missouri Tigers. We're going to do a string of 4 overs here. I've got Missouri going over their win total at 6.5, and a lot of that is because of what this offense can be. Right, they bring in Austin Simmons at quarterback, who was good enough to start for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss last year. Right, Lane, that whole staff, they knew what they had on that roster. They thought it could be a playoff team. Austin Simmons was good enough for them until he got beat up and Chambliss took that job and didn't look back. So Simmons is a really good passer. And in the context of Missouri this year, he is leaps and bounds ahead of what Bo Pribula was last year with his arm. The running back room, a lot of it is determined based on how healthy Ahmad Hardy is. I think you're going to see him maybe not come back until SEC play in week 4. But even if you don't have Hardy, Jamal Roberts could be a number 1 running back just about anywhere else in the country. You have Zyshawn Edwards, who ran for over 1,000 yards last year at Houston Christian. And then at receiver, Donovan Olubade is back. You bring over Caleb Goody, Caden Lee, who was at Ole Miss with Austin Simmons. Then Demarion Folks, Kendrick Lanier. You have a guy like Nashawn Montgomery in there as well. And maybe the most experienced, most talented offensive line in the country as well. So I really trust Missouri's offense. And then the biggest pushback I'm getting on my Missouri excitement is, what Drinkwitz defense have you been able to look at and say, wow, that's a really good unit? And that is a fair question, especially looking forward to this year where they're replacing so much star power. My counter to that is I don't need the defense to be great. I just need it to be fine. Right? I mean, you want me to get to 7 wins with an offense that is this good on paper at least, right? It's the offseason. It's conjecture. But the defense only needs to be okay. And you have guys like Darius Smith and Langdon Kitchen that are trying to supplement the edge rushers that you lost in Zion Young and Damon Wilson. Robert Woodyard there at linebacker to replace Josiah Trotter. And you bring over a guy like Chris Graves in the secondary. Elijah Dotson at safety from Michigan. There's enough individual talent on that Missouri defense that I believe it can just be serviceable. Right? And looking at Missouri's schedule, it lines up really well where I think that if their offense at least is as good as I think it can be, a 6-0 start is not out of the question. Walk with me. Arkansas Pine Bluff. At Kansas, probably a win. Troy at home. At Mississippi State, that could be a Kamario Taylor game, but Missouri will be favored in that game. They can win that. Home against Florida. We don't really know what the Gators are going to be. You get Florida in this, you get Florida off a home game against Ole Miss, so they could be on the road maybe in a hangover spot if they win that game, and they get A&M at home, and A&M in that spot will be coming off of a home game against Arkansas. So they're not in a hangover spot, but it could be Missouri at least 5-0. It does seem decently realistic. At that point, if you're Missouri, you're 6-0 at home hosting the Aggies. Go get that done. So then if they go 6-0 to start that stretch, maybe even 5-0. We'll just say 5-0. We'll say they start 5-1 through their first 6 games. I need to find 2 wins between at Ole Miss, probably a loss, at Arkansas, very winnable, Texas at home, probably a loss, at Georgia, probably a loss. But then they host Kentucky and Oklahoma. I love the idea of getting to 7 wins there and being able to cash this bet. Especially if their start is as good as they can be, or even just 1 game below. If they start 5-1 through those first 6, just find me 2 wins in the back half of that schedule, and I get to go over 6.5 with Missouri this fall. The third team we've got here are the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, if you look at most sports books, their win total, at least the middle one, because what they'll do now is like offer you 3 options. The main one is really 4.5. But I like what I see out of Kentucky so much this year already that I moved it up to that upper tier of 5.5 because I just really believe that Will Stein can get Kentucky to a bowl game in his first year. Right? Offensively, you have Kenny Minchey at quarterback, who was step for step with C.J. Carr last fall at Notre Dame. Now, he hasn't done it yet. He has not been a full-time starter. That is a good question. It's a fair question. It's a decent concern. But if he was step for step with C.J. Carr, who is now a Heisman favorite, I think I know what I have talent-wise in Kenny Minchey. At running back, C.J. Baxter, former 5-star at Texas, he was a dog whenever he was healthy. And at receiver, a guy like DJ Miller comes back. Nick Anderson, when he is healthy, stud. Shane Carr is coming up from Southern Utah. And they have a true freshman in Kenny Darby, who they cannot stop talking about. Now, defensively, try to have a little more pause. Because you have a lot of guys who just haven't done it yet, who are going to have to step up and really perform like they haven't been able to do so far in their career. You have Ty Bryant there back at safety. He has proven production, but defensively, that's where I have a little more questions, but sort of the same thing as Missouri. How good do I really need Kentucky's defense to be to just win 6 games? Let's go through their schedule. What are their free wins? Right? Youngstown State at home, South Alabama at home. You have those two. So then I have Louisville and their SEC slate. There's 10 more games. I've got to find 4 wins. What are their home games? Right? Alabama. I do think that could maybe be an upset spot, but for right now, we'll say likely loss. You get LSU at home. We don't really know what LSU is going to be, but the Tigers will be the more talented team. But they get Vandy at home. They get Florida at home. Vandy, I think, takes a step back. Florida, we don't know what they are. And that Louisville game is at home this year to end the season as well. And then the road games. At A&M, tricky. At Carolina, Gamecocks are really they're a high variance team. Kentucky could easily go win that game in Columbia. At Oklahoma, tough defense. At Tennessee, first year quarterback. What do we have? At Missouri, is Missouri's defense, like I just said, I hope it's not a weakness, but could it be a weakness for Kentucky? A bowl game is not out of the picture at all. Because I think you're going to see Kentucky, it's still just like a write-off. You have a first-year head coach with the Wildcats, or just overall, he's never done it before. They're a bit of an afterthought. They have so much talent, they have so much potential, and we've seen quick 1 or 2 year turnarounds happen pretty frequently at this point in college football. Now, I'm not saying we get an Indiana right now, right, for the Wildcats, but can they just make a bowl game in year 1 under Will Stein? They've been there before as a program. I think they can. I've got Kentucky over 5.5 wins this fall. We got 2 left here. Let's start with the Texas Longhorns, one of my favorite teams in the country. Their win total's at 9.5. Now, I think this is one of the best rosters in the country. So you look at 9.5, and at least, my first thought is, man, why is that not 10.5? Why isn't that higher? It's because of that schedule. This schedule is brutal. They get Ohio State, obviously, in week 2 as that rematch. Their road conference games at Tennessee, in Neyland, tough. Missouri, LSU, A&M. They don't necessarily have a road game against a bottom tier SEC game. SEC team, excuse me. So all those road games are going to be challenging, and with 4 tough road games, you can't lose more than 2 if I got to go with 9.5. So that's pretty tricky. But then their home conference games, right? Florida, Ole Miss is the hardest one. But then Mississippi State, Arkansas, they don't lose an SEC game at home, I don't think. They had that Oklahoma game in Dallas, in the Red River. They've really had Oklahoma's number in the past. I think that could continue. I think Texas can go over this win total because of those 4 road games. Tennessee, you have a first-year quarterback going up against this defense led by Will Muschamp and Mark Stoops. Tough. Missouri, LSU, A&M. Can I get one of those 3 games? I think I can. So I think Texas can go 10-2 or better. I'm very confident in that this year for the Longhorns because of how Arch is going to develop. The overall talent profile of that offense is way better. The running back room with Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers, way above what it was last year. Right? Way above what it was last year. You bring in Cam Coleman in that receiver who's already made that highlight catch. Offensive line is the question for the Longhorns. I believe is going to be better this year because most of your younger talent you had on the O-line last season is back. Right now they have a year under their belt. So a guy like Trevor Gooseby, NFL prospect, set and done at left tackle. You bring over Melvin Siani from Wake at the other tackle spot. You have a guy like Brandon Baker, who was at right tackle last year. Now he moves to right guard. He fits that mold way better. You have Cole Hudson coming back, who was in the NFL this offseason, but because of that new 5th-year rule, he is back. The old line has a lot of answers this year that they didn't quite have last season. And defensively, Colin Simmons off the edge. Animal. Ian Jeffrard transferring in at the tackle, a stud. You have Rasheem Biles at linebacker, the best backer in the portal. And then at corner, a guy like Bo Masco coming over from Rutgers. Cade Phillips is back. Grayson Littleton is back. There's too much talent on this Texas team for them to miss the playoff, in my opinion. And 9-3, I think will miss the playoff no matter how hard their schedule is. So I think Texas can go 10-2. They can go over that win total at 9.5 this fall. And then the last one I've got are the Alabama Crimson Tide. Their total is set at 8.5. I've got them going over at plus money here, even money, at plus 100. I think Keelan Russell's going to get this quarterback job. That's kind of the first big question you have to answer is who's going to be Alabama's quarterback? I think it's going to be Keelan Russell because of the ceiling he provides. And sure, maybe he's just at least early on in the season a little bit limited in what they at least allow him to do because of his inexperience. I think that this youth movement on Bama's offense this year is going to be absurd. Right, starting off with Keelan as their quarterback. I think Xavier Crowell as the 5-star true freshman running back can easily get a bunch of carries in that room because that running back for Bama doesn't really have a true workhorse. Right, Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, A.K. Deere, who's getting a lot of buzz as well here. I think those young guys can really step up and immediately be big-time factors in a running back room that needs answers. And then Darian Morgan as a true freshman at receiver. If you follow me, you know how excited I am about Ced Morgan immediately being a big-time contributor at receiver. You have Lachir Brooks for his sophomore year, Ryan Coleman-Williams back for his junior year. And then defensively, this secondary I think is one of the best in the country. Led by Xavier Brown, Dijon Lee at corner. You got Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb back there at safety. And they portaled in so many key pieces on their front seven. This Bama team is way more talented than most people realize. And going through their schedule, find me 3 written losses, right? Georgia, maybe Georgia, but you go to LSU, we don't really know what the Tigers are going to be. At Tennessee, first-year quarterback. Home against A&M, you get them in Baton Rouge, in Tuscaloosa, excuse me. It's really hard for me to even find 3. They probably lose that game. Nonetheless, 4, which is what I actually need to go under that win total if I were to lose this bet. So, road games for Bama this year. At Kentucky, who knows what they're going to be, even though I do believe that could be a spot for Kentucky to get that win. At Mississippi State, at Tennessee, at LSU, at Vandy. LSU is the hardest road game there by far. Most of their other road games are very manageable in the conference. And then you have, FSU at home for that revenge spot from last year. You get Georgia at home, A&M at home. The Iron Bowl this year is at home. So some of their more challenging on-paper games are going to be in Tuscaloosa, in Bryant-Denny. I think Alabama is able to go over that 8.5 win total, really led by a bunch of elite youth, especially on that offensive side. I think Bama can be one of the most exciting teams to watch in the country this year. So that'll do it for our win total video here. Those are just 5. There are some other ones I'm interested in dabbling on. And if you want to see some of those in just a shorter form content video, subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter at WillThomasCFB, on TikTok at Tailgate Talk SEC. I'll be doing this stuff the entire rest of the offseason. And then once the season kicks off, like I said, head down. We're covering the sport like nobody else is going to. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.